So when I was a child, my parents moved our family from the suburbs of New York City to the city of Waco, Texas. It was an odd choice for a Jewish family, considering that Waco is in the middle of the Christian Bible Belt. Indeed, I was the only Jewish student in my high school, where each class had about 500 students. One memory that stands out in my mind is my mom visiting my elementary school class to teach the kids about our traditions during the Jewish holidays. At Passover, she would bring potato latkes and chocolate-covered marshmallows. At Hanukkah, she would bring a menorah and these chocolate coins with Hebrew letters that we called Hanukkah gelt. Somehow, the way she engaged my friends helped them to understand us as normal people who happen to have different customs and beliefs. More important, in the context of 8 to 10-year-olds, she made it not that big of a deal. I didn't realize at the time that what my mom was doing was she was engaging in conflict resolution. But it's evident to me now as an adult. She was well aware that religion matters in the Bible Belt, and her children were at risk of being excluded, rejected, or worse, bullied for being different. So she engaged in a little proactive diplomacy. It's interesting now, as I reflect back on that, I realize that she was actually dealing with two types of conflict, the external and the internal. Not only did she manage to softly negotiate our acceptance in the external community through skillful diplomacy, but she also managed to instill in her children a strong sense of identity and self-confidence. Her sense of empathy enabled her to appreciate how being different might cause us inner conflict, confusing feelings of inferiority, intimidation, or worse, shame. She showed empathy for the community too, by being aware that their lack of understanding might lead to fear and distrust, which could manifest in unhealthy ways against us, her children. So by confronting the external conflict in a way that was neither threatening nor apologetic, she averted both potential conflicts in a very female way. She also taught us through her example the value of leadership and communication. So growing up in Jewish in Waco, Texas, as it turns out, really set the course for my life. And that experience of witnessing my mother deal with these issues in such a graceful way informed my whole life path. I was consciously aware as a kid that I was different, and yet I felt just like everybody else. So when it came to choosing a career, at first actually I really wanted to be a marine biologist. We grew up in a house in the woods with the lake in our backyard, and I always was drawn to water. I loved the ocean, and I even spent a high school summer. I had the opportunity to study at Duke Marine Lab in North Carolina. And then in college I went to Texas A&M, and I majored in bioenvironmental science. But in college, what I realized is, as I looked around me, that all of the other students seemed really excited, like really passionate about science. And I didn't feel that way. And for the first time, I thought very meaningfully, really about who I am and what kind of impact I want to make in the world. And somehow, I ended up in law school, which is something that I had previously never imagined in my life that I would do, because you think of lawyers as adversarial and people who are drawn to conflict and fighters. But that's not really me. But I did discover in the summer after my first year at George Washington University, I participated in an international human rights law seminar at Oxford University that was co-hosted by my school. And at that point, I knew I was on the right path. And between being a pre-med / environmental science major at Texas A&M and discovering international human rights law, I just became very self-aware. And now it seems perfect that I would find myself in a career advocating for people who we often think of as strangers in our own society. And after 16 years of doing that, I can honestly say that I love what I do. I feel like I was born to do this work, and I don't actually consider it work. I call it it's more like a vocation. So, as an immigration attorney, I find myself engaging in conflict resolution on a regular basis, again, both external and internal. I spent the first half of my career litigating in front of the immigration court. And usually we do think of court as adversarial. However, my style is a little bit different based on who I am and how I was raised, and in the context of which I was raised. Maybe Alexia would even credit just my hardwired female brain. Instead of approaching litigation as adversarial, I approach litigation as if we're actually all on the same team. And ultimately, we're all seeking successful resolution in a way that promotes truth and justice. And so instead of fighting against the government attorney, I confront the conflict by reaching out to them to communicate so we can build trust and understanding between one another. And I've also found in everything I do, if we recognize the fact that we're human, when we go up in front of the court, we think, oh, I have to be this badass lawyer and convince the judge that I'm right and my client wins. But actually, the first time I went to court, the first thing I did was I said to the judge and to the opposing counsel, I'm super nervous. This is my first time I've ever been in court. But by doing that, by admitting, our human fallibility, that created some empathy from the other side as well. And it broke down the defenses that I think people tend to expect when you go to court. And so through this process of engaging in a respectful way and bringing us down to a human level, I've been able to build really strong relationships, even with the people that I'm supposed to be fighting against. So when I contact the government attorney, I listen with empathy. I don't dismiss anything they say. In fact, I can't dismiss anything they say because anything I dismiss will turn into a battle in court. And so to be the best advocate, I have to actually validate what they say and then find creative solutions that help them to recognize that we want the same thing in the end. We want truth and justice to be served. And I can present them with, all that they need in order to feel comfortable coming to some resolution with me even before we go to court. So basically, I do the work for both sides. I make the government attorney's work very easy by listening to what their concerns are and then addressing them and then convincing them that we have all the evidence we need to prove that my client, qualifies for this benefit, and so then they're not fighting us on it. If they tell me that if they have resistance and they say you haven't proven this, well then I'll go and I'll prove that and I'll bring it back to them. And by the time we get into the court, I've also done the judge's job because now we come to court and we both agree and everybody's happy. It's a win-win-win situation, and the judge is super happy because, the backlog in the immigration courts is crazy. And so when you come in there for a 2-hour hearing and you can be done in 20 minutes, you earn a really good reputation with the judge. They really appreciate the fact that you did your homework, you built relationships, you worked together to find a solution that was good for everybody. And in fact, in Maryland, there's one immigration court, and the chief judge, immigration judge at that immigration court, invited me to guest lecture in his immigration law class at the University of Baltimore once a semester. And I was the only private attorney who had that privilege. And it was because of, I had earned his respect through my female leadership skills. Similarly, that's actually all dealing with the external conflicts that I work with. But similarly, working with immigrants for such a long time, I've had the privilege of witnessing so many people go through these internal conflicts. And most people really only deal with those internal conflicts on a personal basis in your own life. I'm sure everybody here can think of one experience where you've kind of confronted even your own inconsistencies, your own identity, and had to question your priorities. Well, I have the unique vantage point working with people that are coming from one place and landing in another place and living in a different culture, often using a different language on a daily basis, raising kids in a different environment that they're used to. And I witnessed them go through these identity crises, really, on some level. But in terms of conflict resolution, external and internal, the things that I have found to be most successful across the board are consistent. Empathy is very important. Empathy for yourself and empathy for the other people that are involved in the conflict or potential conflict. Communication. Communication is really an effort at understanding. It's knowledge gathering. We're gatherers. We gather the knowledge so that we understand the complete situation, because with all the knowledge, then we know how best to deal with it. When we become aware, then we can see the truth, right? So even when we're going through these exercises with ourselves, if we are aware of all of our own truths and inconsistencies, then we can better deal with our own inner conflicts. And we validate ourselves. Like Rema said in her TED Talk, recognize that the ugly is beautiful too. It's part of who we are. We're all human beings. We don't have to be Superwoman. In fact, if we were, that would be so boring. I mean, who wants to be perfect all the time? It's so predictable, right? I mean, you could die tomorrow and it wouldn't matter, because like everybody would know what your life should have looked like. But instead, you know, we are these brilliantly complex, beautiful, and ugly at the same time people. And just knowing who you are is really the most important way to resolve conflict within and without. And knowing who you're working with is likewise, you know, the best way to be able to deal with conflict between and among different people, groups in mediation setting or interpersonal, one-on-one. And also you can look at the macrocosm as well as a macrocosm of microcosm. So, you know, anything on an individual level, one-on-one, like it's really the same lessons, the same way of engaging that you will see people do in a family context. The same interpersonal skills, the empathy and communication. And the third one is leadership, right? Having the courage to confront the conflict, not in an aggressive way that's threatening, and not in an apologetic way, right? But with truth, with honesty. This is just what is. And what is might not be perfect, but that's what we're going to try to, that's our goal, is to be on that path towards perfection, right? The title of my talk, Alexia put in the schedule, is Conflict Resolution from the Inside Out. And in my life, I think actually maybe it would be better called Conflict Resolution from the Outside In, because I've had this unique perspective to work with people that go through conflict, and I help them. I advocate for them. I mediate and negotiate for them, you know, for the past 16 years. And so my brain has received a lot of repetition, which I think affects your brain as well.
And so I've been able to take all the lessons that I learned from other people's situations